There is a person in almost every room you have ever walked into who decided, before anyone spoke a word, exactly how much authority they were going to extend to you. You never knew it was happening. Most people believe that power in a room is established by the person who speaks the most, or the loudest, or the most confidently. That belief is understandable. It is also almost entirely wrong. The actual architecture of who controls a room is built in silence, in the pauses, in the gaps between sentences, in who fills empty space and who doesn't. And the people who understand this have a structural advantage over everyone else in the room that is effectively invisible. What I'm going to show you in this video is not a trick. It is not a technique you can practice in a mirror. It is a framework for reading something that has been happening around you your entire life. And once you see it, you will not be able to stop seeing it. I'll warn you now, some of what follows is going to be uncomfortable, because there is a reasonable chance that when we're done, you'll understand something about your own position in rooms you thought you understood. Every group of people that occupies a space together develops almost immediately an unspoken agreement about who is permitted to let silence exist. Watch what happens when a conversation stalls. Someone, not everyone, always someone specific, will feel a physical compulsion to fill it. A comment, a question, a noise, something. The discomfort of empty air becomes intolerable to them and they resolve it, every time without thinking. Now watch the other person, the one who didn't move, the one who let the silence sit there and looked at it almost with patience, as though the silence was not a problem to be solved, but information to be collected. That person is not simply comfortable with quiet. They have, consciously or not, understood something fundamental, that in any exchange between two people, the one who needs the silence to end first has already signaled something about where they stand. They've signaled need, and need, in the grammar of status, is the one thing you cannot afford to show before the other person shows it first. This is what I call the silence hierarchy. It is not about dominance in any crude sense. It is about the difference between people who experience silence as a vacuum, something wrong, something to be corrected, and people who experience it as neutral space that belongs to whoever chooses to use it. The first group fills silence because they are afraid of what it means. The second group holds silence because they already know. There is a second layer to this that most people miss entirely. And it operates not in the silences between people, but in the silences within a single person's speech. Think about the last time you spoke with someone whose opinion of you genuinely mattered, a senior person at work, someone you were trying to impress, someone whose approval you needed but wouldn't admit to needing. Now think about how fast you spoke, how quickly you moved from one point to the next, whether you left space, real space, between your sentences, or whether you filled every available millisecond with the next word, the next thought, the next piece of evidence that you were worth listening to. Most people, in high-stakes conversations, accelerate. The pressure of the moment compresses their speech. They say more, faster, covering ground as quickly as possible, as though the other person might stop listening if there is even a beat of empty air. This is the exact opposite of what works. The people who are perceived as most authoritative, not the loudest, not the most aggressive, but genuinely authoritative, share one trait that is so consistent it operates almost like a law. They speak slowly, not to be dramatic, not as a performance. They speak slowly because they are not afraid of the space between their words. They do not fill that space with noise because they do not believe the other person will look away. And here is the mechanism underneath that. Pace communicates certainty. When you rush, you are communicating at a level the other person feels before they process it consciously, that you are not sure you'll be heard. When you slow down, you communicate that you already know you will be. The room adjusts to your pace, not the other way around. In every conversation you have ever had, someone was setting the pace and someone was following it. The question you have never been asked directly is which one you have been. Now I want to tell you something that is going to sound wrong the first time you hear it. High-status people do not try to fill space. Read that again. Not as a productivity tip, not as a communication strategy, but as a description of a behavioral pattern that repeats itself across every professional environment, every high-stakes social context, every room where something real is at stake. The person in that room who talks the most is almost never the person who matters most. The person who asks the most questions is almost never the one being deferred to. The person who explains themselves the longest, who makes sure everyone understands their reasoning, who fills every gap with justification, that person is engaged in a form of status performance that every other person in the room reads, instantly and unconsciously, as low. Because here is what the performance gives away. Explaining yourself at length signals that you believe your position requires defense. And positions that require defense are not secure positions. The person who holds power in a room does not explain themselves. They make a statement. They let it sit. They watch how the room responds to it. And they respond to the room's response, not to the room's need for reassurance. Low-status behavior is not loud. It is not aggressive. In its most common form, it is simply the compulsive filling of space, words, justification, explanation, noise, driven by the fear that without it, the room won't take you seriously. High-status behavior is the willingness to be taken seriously without asking for it. If you understand the silence hierarchy and the pacing dynamic, you now have the two instruments you need to read the actual power structure of any room you enter. Not the official one, not the org chart, not the titles on the business cards. The real one. Here is how to do it in under 90 seconds. When you enter a space where a group of people are already talking, do not join the conversation immediately. Find a position where you can observe it. You are not looking for who is speaking. You are looking for three things. First, who does the room orient toward when there is a pause? Not who speaks into the pause. Who does everyone else's body language point toward during it, even for half a second, even unconsciously? That person is the axis of the room. They may not be speaking. They may not have spoken yet, but the room has already decided they are the reference point. Second, who adjusts their behavior when a specific person enters or speaks? Not who looks up. Everyone looks up. Who changes their posture, their volume, their sentence structure? The person who causes those adjustments without asking for them holds something real in that room. Third, who never seems to need the conversation to go in a particular direction. Most people in any discussion are quietly managing an agenda, trying to get to a point, establish a position, receive a particular response. The person who appears to have no agenda is almost always the one who has already secured what they came for, or who knows they will regardless of how the conversation goes. These three observations take less than 2 minutes. They will tell you more about who actually controls the room than anything said in the next hour. The silence hierarchy is not a power move. It is not something you deploy in a meeting to win. It is a description of a phenomenon that was already operating in every room you've been in every conversation that mattered, in every moment where you felt, without being able to name it, that something important was being decided, and you weren't sure which side of it you were on. The people who hold rooms are not necessarily smarter, more qualified, or more prepared than the people who don't. In many cases, they are none of those things. What they have, and what most people never develop, is a relationship with silence that is not adversarial. They do not experience emptiness as a problem. They experience it as a surface, and they understand that what you place on that surface, or choose not to place, is the most precise signal you will ever send about where you believe you belong. The room will always decide. The only question is whether you decided first. If you've been filling silences your whole career, you already know which seat you've been assigned. The question now is whether you intend to keep sitting in it.